Hey everyone, and welcome to our round 7 recap of 2024 FIDE candidates. And this one's a little bit delayed because I came down with a bit of a fever and headache yesterday, and only just started to feel a little bit better. So this recap's going to be a little bit shorter than usual. And in our first game, Carolina against Pragnananda. Going into this round, the players were a half point off the lead behind Nepo and Gukesh. And this is all pretty standard. White playing to consolidate his extra space. Well, Black looks for counterplay on the queen side, and with the move knight a5, Black is using some tactics to make use of the weakness of the square at c4. We had knight a4, queen c6, knight c5, knight c4. It's all pretty standard by both sides. Bishop c3, b6, and Black basically ends up with a fine position where he managed to recycle his bad bishop, his bad light squared bishop. And after g6, Black just gets a quite harmonious development, where it's admittedly not so easy for White to find a great pawn break in this sort of structure. If you're enjoying the video so far, do make sure to leave a like and to consider subscribing. So after takes, and bishop h6, I was actually watching some of this game live, and already I started to feel that this position is already kind of easier to play Black, because White can't really fight so easily for the control of the c-file when the c1 square is already covered by the bishop. Queen e7 gets out of the pin on the knight. We had bishop a6, rook c7. And at the moment it's kind of hard for both sides to fully take over the file, but that's where Prague's next move of knight b8 works really quite well here. Just intending to get rid of the bishop and then take over the file. So bishop d3 is played, a5 asking some questions against the pawn. And here I was expecting Caruana would play a move like b5 and just keep it solid, but for whatever reason he decided to take, and after queen e1, knight c6. I mean, this was a game that, even though it ended in a draw, it was Prague who basically had the chances, in the position, and this was probably his best chance here, where if he plays the move g5, it actually asks some tough questions, where it's not so easy for White to comfortably defend the pawn on d4, like queen e3, king g7 still threatening g4, and is already forcing White into moves like h4 and this sort of position where only Black can really be better with the extra pawn and some attacking chance on the king side to work with here. And still the pawn on d4 is a little bit weak. There's a little bit of static right now in the background, like loud like pitch noise. So if I appear a bit distracted at some point, that's probably why. But after rook a8, the game kind of just petered out into not a whole lot, where, again, g5 still gives Black some small chances, but Prague didn't go for this approach. He played in a more, you could say, safe kind of way. But this safe approach also meant that White was basically doing fine, that Black wasn't able to make any of the short-term pressure, and eventually they just shuffled around, and from here a draw was agreed, having reached move 40. So, this game, there was some small chance for Prague. There's always a good feeling when you have the better side of a draw of the Black pieces against world number 2. But maybe one of the less interesting games of the round. On the other hand, this draw between Nakamura and Nepomniachtchi was actually very, very interesting, which had some quite beautiful fireworks coming up, as we will see. So this was actually a line that both players had prepared in the main line of at least you could say the old school main line of the Petrov, where, Nakamura had prepared this in 2022, while Nepo had, prepared this whole line for the World Championship match with Carlsen, realizing, of course, White can't take on d5 yet because of bishop h2. So White goes to c5 instead, and, now this g5 is kind of a somewhat fresh idea, with White trying to, prepare knight h4 to harass the bishop and to cause some problems in this way. But of course, the players had prepared this already, and game went a5, trying to harass the queen away. Also note, by the way, that queen b7 does run into knight a6, and the queen does get trapped there, just so you know. So White plays knight bd2, bishop e6, just avoiding the capture on e4. Queen b7 looks really strong, but Nepo hits back with knight takes f2. Of course, we can't take the knight because then the queen will be lost to discovered attack. So White plays the counter move of bishop takes h7 check. So after takes, there's no knight takes d3 anymore. but now black goes knight h3, and the position is just very, very sharp, where maybe black is down, the exchange and a pawn, but white has many pieces out of play, and white is also very weak on the light squares, with his king being quite open. So at queen b7, rook e8, you can sort of tell by the time usage that, Nakamura had already prepared all of this before the game as such. And Nepo, had looked at it before, but, was taking a bit of time to recollect his preparation. And turns out here, black should probably play to move king g8 and kind of keep the bishop on g4 a bit longer as such. But in the game, Nepo plays move bishop f5 after some thought, which, now does give white a chance to try and consolidate the position a little bit, where the Indian really likes to move a4 and the idea of kind of bringing the rook to the defense in this way, which might seem a little bit computerish, but, it does have a logic where it means you don't have to move our bishop out of the way to get the rook into the game. So you could argue it's more efficient in that respect. In the game, Nakamura's knight ef3 is definitely quite logical from the human point of view, where after knight f6 and knight g1, obviously we can't ever take it while there's a skewer on the king and queen, but knight is still a very good defender, and it does keep the queen and bishop stuck, covering in a way. Now here, black probably should play to move knight e4 and just put the knight actively. The move in the game of king g8 is maybe just a little bit too prophylactic, where white probably could have played knight df3 and kept some advantage. But yeah, in the game, I think what Nakamura sort of said he missed after the game was that after a4, he just simply missed the following combination that Nepomniachtchi played, because, if you don't play this next move or queen g6 here, it's actually going to be pretty rough for black. But it turns out bishop g3 is a really nice combination. After takes, knight f4, the idea is that black is sacrificing two pieces. However, there's the threat of knight g3 and, king h2 runs into queen g3, so only move then is king f1, which allows black to win back the material, and after take, it's basically one more accurate move that black needs to find to secure the draw, which Nepo found, bishop g4, and the idea is that you're just going to take the knight and just basically harass the white king non-stop with, with checks and attacks. After knight b3, trying to keep everything defended, but then queen g2, and Nepo just forced the draw with, checks ad infinitum, and the game ended like this on move 40. So, pretty well played game by both players. There were some small improvements, but sort of a good example what very deep preparation looks like in chess, especially in these, Petrov lines that basically have been worked out to a forced draw in correspondence. But over the board, positions are complex enough that both sides will get their chances. Anyhow, for our next game, we have Abasov against Vidit, which featured the Berlin that Vidit has been relying on in this tournament. And Abasov plays one of the more strategic lines with castles, knight d7, and the knight c3, bishop e3 approach game is not one of the, you could say, absolute mainline ones. More often you're going to see white play an approach like knight d7 and knight c4, or go c3 and try to take the space in the center. But Abasov was happy just to get his very kind of static position with, the double pawns, but also a file for the rook. Black played b6, we had a3. I mean, this position there a lot of reasonable moves for both sides. Kind of interesting to note that the machine actually thinks that you can even castle long and is just not at all concerned by a pawn attack on the queen side, because I guess we do have 4 pawns that are protecting our king in the sense. And the opposite castling does give more scope, I guess, to, to get winning chances. But the move in the game, a5, is obviously fine as well. And white played this tricky move of knight e2, with the point that it's maybe not so keen, not so enticing for black to, to take everything, because, queen b4, knight e5 would be, would be very good for white. Well, turns out the queen a7 is even better, but you get the idea that it's not something that black can go for. And you could play c5 if you, want to try and resolve the tension this way. And that might actually give black some sort of edge. But the game saw castles, knight g3, g6 kind of kills the knight a bit. Queen d2, c5, and it's a very interesting middle game. When I was watching it live, I really felt there was a good chance this game would be decisive because of the very wide range of imbalances present here. So black plays rook f7, just steadily building up the position, or h5 to kick the knight away. So the white knight heads back. Queen e6, h3, and white tries to steadily make something happen on the king's side. Knight h4 here does threaten a fork on f5. But it's also just very hard to pierce black's position. Black is just so solid here, and it's hard to find a way to meaningfully open things up. And there comes a point in the game where black actually starts to outplay white. For now, I actually do kind of like white's chances. In a position like this one, let's say, as a few more moves get played. Like around this point, I think white actually is doing quite well here. If he plays something like rook ab1, for example, and just brings a knight around to kind of attack some of the black weaknesses. In that case, I definitely like white's chances, but instead white got a little bit too fixated on the king side attack, and after take rook af1, knight h7, I think that white's next move was a mistake here, where the move knight e2 is maybe just poorly timed at this stage, let's say. I have someone who keeps challenging me on lead chess for some reason, and we definitely don't want to have to deal with that. Anyhow, I blocked the person who was challenging me, so hopefully that will ensure no more interruptions. But knight e2 does turn out to be a mistake, and probably the best is just to admit that you don't have anything on the f-file here, and just go for a bit more of a defensive strategy, and only now does it make more sense to bring the g3 knight to a better post. But in the game, after knight e2, the problem is that queen d6 has quite annoying timing. Because rook d1 is going to run into bishop e4, and this pin is a big problem. So it kind of forces white into the ugly knight c1, and after f5, this pin means that white really has a hard time to survive here. And it was only because of, let's say, a little bit of good luck that, the white was able to save the game, because the attack on the king side is looking really strong right now, and the white also has quite a few weaknesses here. So after g3, to meet g4, knight h4, and try to defend in that way. Black goes knight f6, knight d2, and at this point, rook d6 end up being a little bit of a step in the wrong direction, where what black should have done is play the move queen d6 and set up the counterattack on the knight to keep control of the position, as it were. After rook d6, knight to bishop d7, black did actually get a little bit of a second chance, because here white really needs to get the knight to d5 to kind of get some play going, and if black plays c6 to stop that, you are giving up the pawn, so it's still going to be okay for white. But knight b1, is just not quite working here. After h4, knight b c3, c6, gh4. In the game, black played a move g4, trying to force open lines in this way. But probably the move rook h7 was the correct way to get at the white king, and black would in fact have a pretty big advantage in a position like this one. You can see that black is the one with the stronger attack against the king in this instance, and black does have very good chances to win here. After g4, knight g3, white was sort of able to defend himself here with a nice move of rook takes f6, an exchanging tactic to just basically get all the pieces off the board. And then after takes, there's just no real way to break through. There's only one weakness in white's position in the h3 pawn. And white just sits on the position, and players realize there's not much they can do, so the draw by repetition of moves is what happened from here. A game where there were some chances for verdict, but in the end, ended up being a draw. And that leaves us with our final game, which definitely had its share of, you could say, heartbreak in it, because this was a game where Firouzja, was going to game in last place, equal last place, while Gukesh was equal in the lead with Nepo going into this round. So it makes sense as an opportunity, where if Gukesh could win with black, he would have, could potentially take the outright lead. But this idea of playing bishop d7, it's not super common, but I think it's a quite reliable equalizer against the London, where you just trade off white's good bishop and just develop normally from there. Now, Firouzja, decided to play it in an enterprising way, going h4 and, bring the rook up to create some attacking chances. You could also play a move like h5 and try to set up a pawn, but in the game, rook h3 was played first. We had rook bishop e7, h5, h6. With a4, white just wants to resolve the tension between the bishops. And we get this position where, white is basically going to try to attack the black king using his extra space. And black, meanwhile, is going to look for counterplay on the queen side. They bring a knight to c4 as well, probably not in this version, but it's a plan you'll often see in these structures in general. Black ends up playing to move queen c6, just trying to coordinate things, and white plays knight e5. And it's still a position that probably is just fine for black objectively. But with white having the attack, you can probably say it's a bit easier to play for him in general. Though looking at the clock times, I was thinking maybe Gukesh can pull out the win as such. Now, after queen takes a5, this is kind of an interesting moment, because white can actually force a draw if he wants to. With queen d2, king h7, he can basically move back and forth and sort of make the point that black has to deal with bishop to a6 somehow, and if white wanted to just make a draw, this would be a way to do so. But Furusha, being on -3 going through, kind of had nothing to lose and went for it with the move c4. To which Gukesh found a nice defensive rook g8 just to defend the pawn. It also means if queen c1, you can also play rook c8 and bishop h6, rook c4 is going to give a pretty strong counterattack to black as such. In the game, white played the move rook a1. Probably white should just trade down with cd5, but after rook a1, queen b4, now it's black who's starting to take control. Admittedly, I wasn't watching game from this point because I'd already gone to bed and was recovering from my illness, let's say. But yeah, from here, black's starting to take control quite nicely. He's up a pawn, he's got a very strong knight, and queen c5 as well. There's just a very annoying pin where f3, knight g5 kind of shows up some of the problems that can arise for white with this pin on the d file. So white plays a move rook c1 immediately. Black goes rook g to d8. In hindsight, it might have been more precise to play the rook to c8 instead, just to avoid any cd5 issues. But yeah, after rook g d8, white was able to play to move b4, and black is still better, but at least white is kind of creating some chances. And after cd5, black played this move of knight f2, just making things very, very spicy. Because if ed5, white will go rook b3 and get back one of the pawns and basically be okay there. But after knight f2, king f2, rook d5, actually after the game, Furusha himself kind of admitted that after bishop c5, he initially thought that he was just dead lost, that he's just losing the piece, or having this sack material rook c5 and is just dead here. But then he got to this position and realized that actually he has to move queen b3 to survive here. And after rook takes queen takes b3, now the position is actually quite okay for white, where the players are in a bit of a time scramble, and as one should do in a time scramble, white continued to play very actively. At this point, maybe the best option is to go b5 and just keep as many pawns alive as possible here. Maybe the concern was rook f3, and perhaps this was rooks on the 7th was a bit of a fear for black, but we can even play a move like rook g8 and that will be reasonably solid. Black realistically shouldn't lose this position. In the game, we had rook a8, and Furusha found this very, very nice idea of knight to d7, which does set up ideas like knight b6 forks, for example. And black probably for this region should have played rook d2 check first, just to take some of the sting out of knight b6. Because after king h7, the problem is that now rook f3 is setting up all kinds of mating concepts, and the move a3 in a game just end up being too slow after rook f7. Well, you can't play a2 in time because knight f6 and it's just going to be made on h7 after some moves. While after king h8 in the game, there was knight f8 and knight g6 and mate next moved, and therefore Gukesh resigned here. It's definitely quite a painful loss, but looking at the standings, definitely still an open tournament. I mean, Nepo is in the outright lead on +3, but it's also true he had quite a few lucky escapes, against Gukesh and Prague. Those are both games he could very easily have lost in a different universe. And you have Gukesh, Prague, and Caruana are all half a point behind with still with a shot for the first place. And that granted is true in every candidate before this point, that the player who was leading after round 7 did go on to win. So I mean, if you were betting on it, you definitely would be kind of stupid not to bet for Nepo at this point. But at the same time, it's still going to be some interest for the spectators. It's the 90% result is likely to ensue. But if you've played poker like me, you'll know that the 10% does happen and, you know, does sort of sometimes sting in a way when it goes against you and leads to massive euphoria when it goes your way. Which is my way of saying that, yeah, if Kukesh or Prague end up pulling out the win from here, then yeah, there would be something pretty special about it. But anyway, hope that you enjoyed this recap, and yeah, let me know in the comments below what was your favorite move or your favorite game from the round. Tomorrow is a rest day, so I will be sharing a fun video on the Damiano Petrov, which I think you guys are really going to like. And yeah, then we'll be back with more candidates content, recapping the round. So yeah, I'll see you then.